You are listening to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, episode 121, Handling the Death of a Player. In today's episode, Josh and I discuss how to handle the death of a player at the table. This was a listener-asked topic surrounding the death at their table. We discuss how to handle the situation and what to do with their character. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode.
Bow, 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 bow. Level Up Your Gaming Podcast.
Welcome into the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me virtually, Josh. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Aaron. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me virtually here. We had such a great time introducing you and Lori and Ken and everybody in the last episode, and then we got some feedback from the previous episode there. A listener of ours, Mike, he wrote in ages ago on like big bad guys, big BBEG, big bad evil guys, and so we gave him a whole host of things in a reply, and then we never heard from Mike again. So we're like, oh, what happened to Mike? And then finally Mike came back, he listened to the entire thing, and so I've gotten a bunch of feedback. So Mike, I just want to say thank you so much for writing into the podcast and basically listening to every episode since then and coming back. So a couple follow-ups for you, Mike. I did email you back, but Jared is still GMing for our group. Actually was just there at his game last week. He's still consistently GMing. Again, one of the reasons why he left the podcast is he was having trouble enjoying the hobby of GMing while doing the podcast. He felt like it was more of a chore to do the podcast and GM as well. So he's losing the joy of the GMing, which is what he really, really loves. But he is still GMing for our group, still going strong with all that stuff. Another question that you asked on our episode on security was, how much security is too much security? And I think that we probably hit on it in the episode, but one of the things, and Josh can jump in here if you'd like, but one of the things that we talked about in the episode was the security isn't there to totally screw over your players. It's there to force them to put a little bit of thought before they just go rushing in and shooting people in a modern setting. Because you basically don't want to give them free reign to do whatever they want. So the security is there to kind of like just rein them in a little bit. And if your players are constantly, pushing the line and stepping over the line, I would say add more security. Make it harder to do things. Make it that the cops will show up, whatever it might be. Whoever is going to respond to you, that you trigger alarms, all those things. Add more security until your players start kind of reining it back and planning a little bit more. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, Josh?
Well, that's the whole your players are murder hobos situation. If the players want to play a game where they get to run around and shoot everything and blow everything up, and you want us to tell a story, maybe you need to reassess, what story you want to tell. Security should be there. You should put in barriers to sort of keep your players following the path that you're looking for and not just guns akimbo all the time. But guns akimbo is a fun way to play things.
So you can play that game, but I would say that if you're going to do a longer
game,
if you're doing a longer campaign and you're trying to make sure that your players are sort of acting in, in concert with the mood that you set up for the game, just make sure that the security is appropriate to make sure that they think about their steps before they act in a secure world, especially in like the World of Darkness setting. Again, the Ring doorbell was the example of they're all over the place. Okay, you probably couldn't be werewolves in this modern world with with the security because something's going to catch you on camera. And I wouldn't say I would avoid using the Ring doorbell to be like, gotcha, guys. Okay, I don't like playing the gotcha GM, trying to be adversarial to your players. But also, I would use the Ring doorbell to be like, you guys probably shouldn't go full Krynos in this neighborhood. Okay. So that's just my thoughts on how much security. The other question that you asked was about mini Discord sessions and then reestablishing mood. So in the episode I talked about gaps between games and that you needed to really reestablish mood to be able to get things in. And you had asked about how do you encourage players to do mini Discord sessions or maybe post one-on-one or do some things as a player. So the first thing is you just got to keep throwing it out there. That's the main thing. Every game session, you got to put it out there. But the problem is that anything that is not scheduled game time is time that your players probably aren't spending thinking a lot about the game. Okay, so if you have other established game times, which is what I would probably suggest, is say, hey, on Tuesday nights, I'm available for an hour. If you post in the Discord during this time, I will reply and we can put together a little one-on-one scene. Okay, it's in addition to the game, so it's another chance for your players to kind of have an established time that they know that you'll be there to dedicate to that time. Because otherwise, I tend to blow off thinking about things with game and doing all that other stuff until it actually comes to the night that we game or the day that we game, whatever that might be. Do you have any thoughts on that, Josh?
Yeah, I've done this before, and in order to establish one-on-one time or time apart from the game where the players can sort of reestablish connection or, jump in and jump out if they happen to have a less than stellar schedule that they can keep, establish that in like a session 0. You go in and you have these one-on-one sessions with the players, sort of develop their own a couple of NPCs or like their little cadre of, whatever they're doing, so that they've got part of their story that's involved with them and them alone. So if they want to come back in and do a thing, they already have sort of that groundwork built for them. And you can just, you can have these little sessions. It also helps to bring back, the player if they've been gone for a little bit of time, sort of reestablish the mood because they're not jumping into an active environment.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, reestablishing the mood is the hardest thing to do, especially if you've had inconsistent gaming sessions. Again, it's not easy to do if you have long gaps in general in your gaming sessions because you have to just bring everybody back into what were you doing and how did it feel when you had left the table the last time. And so it just takes time. It takes a lot of recap, and I would argue it takes the longer your gaps are, the more inconsistent your gaps are. It's just you have to spend more time making sure that your players refocus into the game before you even kick it off for the night. So it's just a tough thing.
Yeah, and it really also helps if you're like in between stories, but if you're in the middle of something when a gap happens, that is just a killer.
I would avoid ending on a cliffhanger that your cliffhanger should be suspenseful and I want to know what happens next, not like this was terrifying and then you stop the game right when it was terrifying, because reestablishing that mood, I've done that before. It was a mistake I made. Reestablishing fear is almost impossible without the build up to what got you there. So make sure that it's a suspenseful, I just want to know what happens next. Wow,
it's good. I can't believe that happened is great. But scared or in the middle of an action is absolutely terrible. You gotta have some sort of all the characters are standing there and they've just seen the big thing happen, and now we can come back later.
Yes,
but they're not in the middle of something. Yes.
Yeah. That's a good point. If you can get the players to commit 10 more minutes and get through the thing and end it there, it'll be much easier to come back in the next episode or the next session, I suppose.
Episode, yes.
Well, I mean,
everything's TV now.
You could say, next season 2, Josh, it's going to be even better.
Bring in new characters.
But so those are kind of the quick follow-ups that I had for you there, Mike. Things that, again, we've done I've done more recent episodes on them. I did them with Jared, and I talked about those, so I figured I'd hit those real quick. But you did have some bigger topics that you wanted to talk about, and I've got a couple of them from you, and one of them we're going to handle here today. It's a more serious topic, which is handling the death of a player. And so I'm going to give the background here. You had a group of players, and one of your players unfortunately passed away while you were playing the game. And I'm sorry to hear that, and that's terrible, and I feel for you. I mean, I couldn't imagine losing one of my friends at the gaming table as well. And one of your questions was, how do you handle the death of that player in the game? I think you specifically asked about using kind of Brazilian rules, which is if the player dies, the character dies. And I don't think that that's an incorrect way to do this. I think that, and Josh will end up speaking to it, but when you handle the death of a player or a character as well, or like somebody has to leave the table, they're similar things in terms of the nature of how you handle them. We've talked about in the podcast, handling character death, or like if you had to separate from somebody from the table as well, meaning like somebody has to leave the table, or you have to tell someone that they can't be part of the table anymore. And those same techniques work there, which is, Bill can't continue to make it every week, and he has to leave the game. Well, you'd use the similar thing here, which is you basically just, the main thing you want to do is you want to be respectful of the character and the person. You don't want to have them go out and a terrible death, and you don't want to shortchange the person. You'd want to treat it as though that person was having their last session with you, and you're letting them go out in a blaze of glory, or you're kind of immortalizing them in your world to continue on. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, Josh?
Well, if a player has to leave the game and they know about it, like this is not, a spur of the moment thing. And this also goes with if a player is dying. And I have dealt with this in the past where a player was fairly sick and had to step out of game. They wanted to, make sure that everybody was okay with when we sit down and tell a story together, you build friendships, you build bonds, and you become more like a family. So when something happens to a member of that family, a member of the group that you actually, have done these adventures with, have had these heroic tales that you've told, that person is a part of this. And I found out he had to step away because he was sick. He's going through some stuff. And I asked him point blank, how would you like to end your character? What would you think would be a fitting end for your character? And you can do that if you know that's going to happen. You can do that if, Susie needs to travel across the country for a new job and she's never coming back. You can do that for that sort of thing. But if it's a sudden departure, if you don't know that it was going to happen, last minute, something has happened. The key thing that I think about with this is, no matter the cause or the reason for the person leaving, don't demonize the player. And I've seen this happen before where, a DM gets it in their head, like he's ruined the game, he's ruined the story, blah, blah, blah. If there is a player that needs to leave the game or leaves the game because they have been a problem, you don't need to demonize the player. They've already done that themselves. And don't take it out on anybody for leaving the game for whatever reason. There should be a modicum of respect no matter why they've left the game, because you never know where it's going to come back later or who feels how they feel about that person. If that person really was a problem, then that person was a problem and everybody knows it. You don't need to make it a point. If the person was well liked and it's just a bad situation, well, maybe the situation will change. Treat it with respect.
That's a good point. Again, they're almost two in that regard. There's almost a separate thing, which is, if somebody left the table because they were, always fighting with the GM, whatever it may be, or maybe fighting with other people at the table, there's just bad blood across the table. Even in that regard, you wouldn't treat ill of the player and the character, because Josh is right, you never know what's going to happen down the line. You would exit that character with respect, and you would leave it, because what's happening at the table is the rest of your players look at you and see how you are going to handle the exit for the player and the character, and they're going to say, this is what the GM will do for me if something were to happen to me. And so the same thing happens here with the death of a player. As Josh said, if they know that they are ill and perhaps that they don't have much time left, you should ask them, what would be the wishes for your character. You can workshop some different things. Like I said, you can, the two suggestions I gave you, Mike, in the email were, either give him if you want to have the character die, have the character die in a glorious kind of way. Again, make it very respectful to the character. You could make it maybe an homage to his life, have something happen in that regard. The character leaves the party permanently, and moves on to have a life outside of the party. Or, like I said, the character, that's a way of kind of immortalizing them, enshrining them in the game. Or the character can become kind of a reoccurring NPC, or an NPC that is always part of the world. And I like that one in a lot of ways as well. It depends on, who the character was, how he played the character. You're probably filling in a lot of those blanks here if this was sudden and you didn't have any time to talk about this with him ahead of time, him or her. And you gotta, like I said, you just have to, but you have to look at what you're going to do with them. If you are going to kill the character, just make sure it's done respectfully. Like, maybe they save one of the other party members' life. Maybe they, you're fighting in some epic battle. I wouldn't autopilot them too long, because you don't want to play that character for them.
Yeah,
but
you don't want to make them a DMPC.
Yes.
Because that's going to end up, even if you do the NPC route, you don't make them a reoccurring character, just a background character. But yeah, doing that, having the glorious end, the noble sacrifice, those are great ways to sort of immortalize the player that you all miss at this point. But also, creating that NPC, or having the character retire off to their this is what they always wanted. They were always fighting to live in peace out on their farm. Now they've got a farm, and they're just going to spend the rest of their days out there, protected from the wilds. Whatever it is that sort of fits that character.
Yeah, I think that's exactly kind of the thing that you want to do. You want to, again, look at who the player was, and then try and do something in concert with that. I know that you play a lot of World of Darkness, and there are ways that you can turn characters into legends in the game. Perhaps they do something so glorious for the Werewolf Nation that they are immortalized as a legend. You spoke about one of your background stories for one of your characters, and spoke about how his long-lived tenure in the Werewolf Nation eventually led him to becoming, you couldn't basically play the character anymore because he'd become too powerful, but instead the GM chose to make your character part of a totem. Like there are different ways that you can do that. If you're doing D&D and you're listening to this, you could make them part of one of the gods, or one of the like a scion of one of the gods. You can make them
a patron, or a warlock patron, or like an ancient, if they're a wizard, you could have them as somebody who's written books, and now you come across you're this fabled character's tome of blah blah blah, and it can show up any sort of different ways. And having that sort of reoccurring thing throughout your games with those same players sort of can be a nice reminder and something that players will look forward to. And it can happen in any situation. Spacefaring, you could do, name a ship, or like a shipyard, or a floating space station that has a shrine to this person. You can just have that as sort of a background thing that continues to be. And some of these same things, yeah, we're talking about if you've got the death of a player, but this also works really well for if a player has to leave. Obviously, don't autopilot them and kill off their character, but if a player has to leave, you can have them, retire or become an NPC or go on their own adventures, and they can sort of be in the background in case they ever do come back. And if it was somebody that the players enjoyed and had a good time playing with, then having that sort of floating around the background, they can just be like, running a mission somewhere, and they find out that Susie's character came through here last week, guns blazing, took out a whole bunch of vampires in a nest. It was great. I'm like, oh, that's good to hear.
There's a lot of different things that you can do with that too. And if you have a player who is leaving the table for one reason or another, you always get to then have that. You can usually have that conversation. I wouldn't say you always get to, but you can usually have the conversation of, hey, how would you like me to handle your player or your character exiting the table? Do you want your character to go off and live some dream he had from his backstory? Do you want your character to go out in a blaze of glory? Do you want, how do you want to handle that in that regard, which is what you're talking about, which is that, not just a player dies, but, your friend has to move to Ohio and you're not just going to be able to game with them anymore.
I'm not going to disparage Ohio at this point,
but I'm just saying, name your state. The person has to leave, and they can't play with you anymore. I mean, in this world, we have the online gaming, but not everybody has the time. I don't know. Somebody has 4 new children, and they can't.
Well, or if your game has been in person and sitting, around a table, and you've got your dice and you've got your minifigs, and you go out every week and you build these beautiful maps, and the players are used to that. Switching to like one person being online can be just a bad situation. And even then, a new job, moving to a new place, any sort of reason that somebody could just be like, it's not going to work for me at this point. And that's okay. You don't need to, there's no reason to get mad at the person for it. Life happens. So don't disparage the person. If they were a good person, they were a good person. If they were a bad person, they were a bad person. The people at the table know it. You don't need to be anything more than respectful for what's happening at the time, and find out what's the best way to exit their character.
Yeah, there are DMs who are very vindictive and will do terrible things.
I've run across them a number of times. What I would like to suggest, if you do have a player leaving for whatever reason, now this is not exactly in the wheelhouse of DMing, more like working in a business and being a manager. Run an exit interview. Find out what they liked and what they didn't like about the style and the settings. You should be doing this on a regular basis with your characters anyway, finding out how they're enjoying their game. But running an exit interview is a great way to sort of get the unfettered view of what's going on, because this person is not going to be playing with you anymore. I have had people that will lie about what they're enjoying and not enjoying because they think that's what the DM wants. So you got to...
Criticism in the moment is much harder than criticism when you know that you're not going to have to deal with any of the consequences or fallout of your potential criticism. And so that's why the exit interview not a bad thing. Again, you should always be trying to get your players to be open and honest with how they feel about something, and you might have to be more pointed about different questions that you ask. But in this case, you can ask people to be really kind of very brutally honest about it because, again, they might never play at your table again. So what do they care about, saving your feelings? And you can even say it in that exact same way, which is, don't spare me any courtesy here. Just let me know honestly because I want to make it better for the rest of the table.
Yeah. And if they're not coming back, or if they don't feel comfortable with, saying brutal, horrible things to your face, hopefully they don't have any horrible, brutal things to say to your face. But they can always write it down. I mean, they ain't coming back. So you'll have that, written down. You just have a couple of questions. And you should have a couple of questions that you want to ask your players on the regular basis anyway, just to sort of like a check-in. Is the mood of the story the way that you're expecting? Am I treating characters with the sort of respect that you're looking for? Has there been any situations that you were uncomfortable with? Because when we're telling stories, when we're doing this as a communal act of enjoyment, you shouldn't have people that are not enjoying it because of the story that you're telling. And if that's the reason somebody's leaving, well, you should know that. And you should figure out how not to have that happen again. But if it's the reason they're leaving is external to that, you should find out, what things were good so that you can capture that magic.
Yeah, you should find things that they liked and things that they didn't like, and so you can continue to accentuate the things they liked, and they can also give you perspective of your other players who might not be open to, saying, I just really don't like this thing that Josh does in his games. So, Josh is the GM sitting across from me, so I've got to pick on him for a little bit here.
I'll try and be better, man. I'm sorry.
The only other thing that I really have to say about if you are dealing with the death of a player or a person leaving, anything that has to do with a character exit, in addition to being respectful, have it somewhat planned. I know that a lot of GMs like to fly by the seat of their pants. This is one of those times when I would say do not fly by the seat of your pants. Have something planned, or if you have an idea and you're going to sort of improv your way to the end for the player, have something written down that can describe the scene in a very nice way. It takes you probably 10 to 15 minutes to write that description of the final exit for the player and the character, and it's not a lot of work to respect the player that was behind the character and do that for them. And so I wouldn't improv it, because I've seen GMs improv dramatic situations or try to improv dramatic situations, and they fall totally flat when trying to improv it. And, again, if you wanted to have like an epic final speech from a villain, for example, you probably just want to have, even if it's some bullet points that you want to hit, make sure that you're hitting the things that you actually want to say when you're exiting the character from the game. Just have some preparation going into it. Even if you don't do any prep prior to that. So I don't know. Maybe you have a different opinion on that.
No, I'm absolutely down with that. Improv is great and all. Improv is a great way to bring fun and enjoyment to a game, but drama and being respectful and your plans and stories and stuff like that, you can improv a lot of things, but have notes. Have a list of points you're going to have. You've got a DM screen. You're sitting behind a computer. You're not on stage, right? You don't have an entire audience staring at you when you're doing this. Take notes. Follow them. If you've got if you can think of something that would be a good phrase or speech for this character to have, write it down, read it verbatim. put some actual like emotion into it, you can improv that. But like, if you've written something and you plan something and you've come up with this, it's a good way to end this character's arc or their storyline, follow it. And don't be afraid to, give it some oomph, because a player leaving a table like that, they deserve it, but your other players deserve it as well, because they're losing somebody that they've been going on these adventures with.
Yeah, I assume that your table has started to heal from the event, but even if not, there's a void at the table. Okay, if that's the first time that you guys have gotten back into the gaming, and that requires a level of respect for the player and a level of respect to the rest of the players at the table, which are make sure that everybody is doing well and is ready to see the end of like, again, that's the legacy of the player that you have left in the game. So make sure that they are they are seen to, and it's effectively you eulogizing their character in that moment. So do the same thing, and you're still eulogizing the player. You're giving the send off, perhaps the warrior send off, perhaps it's the hero send off, whatever it may be. But still, you're doing that, just like Josh said, not just for that player, but also for the rest of the players at your table. And you'll get a lot of respect from the rest of your players at the table. Maybe they all want to say something. I don't know. Make it a communal effort. It is an experience that you are gaming with friends, and they might be saying their goodbyes there in that moment too. And again, it's part of that healing process as well when you're dealing with the grief. So
yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add to this, Josh?
No, the only other thing I was thinking about is, if you've got a long-term player is leaving, you could always just rip the badges off of his vest and beat him out of the group, but I don't think that's appropriate. No. I take your dice. I throw you on the floor. Now leave my game. No. I think it's whether the player is leaving by their own accord or not. If the worst has happened and the player is no longer with us, treating them with respect and treating the rest of your players with respect is the way to go. Plan it, make it fit the character, make it fit the player, and work with your players to find what they think would also be a fitting end, so that they are happy with the situation. And maybe not happy, maybe just comfortable. I think that's better, because if a player dies, a fellow storyteller, a fellow gamer leaves us, that's not necessarily something you're going to be happy with.
No.
But it can be something we can be comfortable with.
I think that's a very well way to put it and to end the episode. So, Mike, again, I'm sorry to hear about your player again. I'm really sorry about that. Sorry for your group. Hope you guys are all healing well and doing well as well, and hopefully his family and everybody else around him is doing well now. But if you have any thoughts on the episode, I know this is similar to the episode we talked about, which is having characters leave. I know we've kind of hit on this before, but if you have any thoughts on it, levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. We are also on YouTube, so go ahead and smash that like button. Hit the notification bell, all that stuff. Review the podcast, recommend it to a friend, all those different things. Keep listening for future episodes. So, for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Gaming podcast, level it up.